Let's talk about this Abu Dhabi deal. It is very unusual. How will this actually work?
So our mission has always been to discover and back the world's most talented entrepreneurs, help them build successful companies at scale, and build thriving global ecosystems. And over the past 8 years, we feel like we've made a lot of progress, but we've just scratched the surface. We've invested in more than 2,000 companies around 16 countries around the world, and we feel like our mission is far from done. And in terms of our partnership and investment with ADFG, Abu Dhabi Financial Group, we're looking forward to taking 500 to the next level. They've joined our board. They have a minority stake in the company, and we're looking forward to having them help us further 500's mission and continuing to serve entrepreneurs around the world.
Do you worry about giving up control?
I actually think it's an interesting question when you look at what's happened in Silicon Valley, especially over the last couple of years. When you think about the concept of governance, when you look at VC, there's not really much sense of governance. I mean, you have limited partners who are investors in the fund, but really for most early stage VCs in Silicon Valley, it's really the private partnership. It's different from an operating company where you do have more of a board of directors where you would expect some of that governance to happen. So for us, we feel like there's a lot of synergy between us and ADFG, and we're looking forward to having them involved at the board level.
So how did LPs feel about this, and did you lose any LPs as a result?
No, actually, the reaction we found from a lot of LPs was they were very excited about 500 having additional institutional support from ADFG, both from the kind of the operating company perspective as well as our funds. In the near future, they do plan to anchor our upcoming funds, and all in all, for LPs, most of the reaction was very positive.
Now, 500 startups actually went global when it was not en vogue, though there is still some skepticism about international investments. Are you seeing returns?
For the last 8 years, we've invested in international companies, with our vision to be the most global Silicon Valley VC. And from the early days, it was definitely something that was seen as a bit curious, questionable.
Right, you went to Southeast Asia when it wasn't cool.
Exactly, exactly. And when we look at the companies we've invested in over the past 8 years, in terms of some of the very promising companies, a lot of them have come from outside of Silicon Valley, outside of the US. Some examples include Grab, Carousel, TalkDesk, which was originally from outside of the US and has since set up headquarters here in San Francisco. But there's just a lot of opportunity in terms of talent, as well as now, 8 years later, from when we first started investing internationally, downstream capital, and just a lot more interest in early stage tech. A lot of these markets see tech as the future of economic development, of job creation, and we've observed this over the last 8 years in terms of course, all of us have seen increase in consumer tech product adoption and just capital that's being deployed into tech and entrepreneurship. A lot of it's been driven by governments because they see this as just the future of their market.
So if there is so much opportunity, why isn't Andreessen Horowitz and the like jumping on the bandwagon? Why do they avoid global investing?
It's definitely not for the faint of heart. I think that a firm can do very well just investing in 50-mile radius. So it's really to each their own. I think for a lot of Silicon Valley, I think now the question of whether there's opportunity in international markets is less of a question. It's clear there is. More than 50% of private companies that are valued over $1 billion. Our beloved unicorn terminology. Most of the, more than 50% of them are outside of the U.S. So I think no one questions that. I think in terms of different GPs and what their expertise is and the willingness to go into a market and really understand the nuances and what trends are there, it's hard. And for us, we've definitely seen the ups and downs of trying to go into different markets. It's not easy. I do think that, for example, in terms of what you see as hot and exciting in Silicon Valley, typical things come up like blockchain, crypto, AI, all the buzzwords you can think of. It would be, interesting to see some of that same fervor put into investing into global markets, because as we've seen, the world has gotten smaller. We're starting to see, even US-based companies, corporate strategics acquiring international what were once startups. And so we see just a lot of opportunity in these emerging markets.
So I know 500 Startups is trying to turn a new page, develop its new identity, but I have to ask about Dave. This is founder, former CEO, who left amidst allegations of sexual harassment and even assault, and there were allegations that people at the firm knew as this was happening and didn't act soon enough. I remember when he hired you, he was so excited, and I imagine that this has been tough for you. Do you still talk to him, and how are you weathering this transition?
Yeah, last year was really, I guess the best way to call it is a reboot for the firm. We worked together as a team to reset our mission and values, our culture, our policies, and even our strategy as a firm. And so, for us, we're really looking forward to how we move forward, and in many ways we have. And so, we feel like there's a lot of, me personally, I feel like there's a lot of positive momentum in Silicon Valley, and for us as a global firm, we look at this from a global perspective in terms of whether that's going to turn into sustainable, meaningful change for the industry. I think it remains to be seen. So to me, it just emphasizes that we really need to focus on our mission and our values and contributing to this meaningful change, both in terms of the investments we make as well as who we work with and our own team.
Do you still talk to him? Is he still involved?
Well, today, Dave does not have any control or governance over 500. I would say, if you think of it as many co-founders who separate, the relationships vary. We do still communicate, but
So, I find it interesting that you're taking money from a culture that has, potentially deep-seated problems with sexism. How would you address the skeptics there, that is where the money is coming from?
I think that it's what comes to mind is a little bit of xenophobia, to be honest, when you think about where the money comes from and, that, say, foreign money is somehow not as good or less moral than institutional money here in the US. I mean, we've seen all sorts of things come out in terms of either institutions, firms, corporates that do have similar issues. So I guess focus just on ADFG as a firm. We've known them for several years. They align very well with our mission and values, and to me that was critical for the firm to make sure that there were these synergies and alignment in what we truly believe. In terms of the Middle East, North Africa region as a whole, I think there obviously are skeptics around what you just mentioned, but I think in terms of looking forward and the progress they're making, I would focus on that. Within the Middle East, all the different countries are different, and so I think this is really actually a chance to show that they've invested into a female-led firm, a firm that is investing and looks to invest in diverse founders and businesses because we believe it's just good business.
So it's good to see you as a CEO. What are you doing to invest in women, hire more women, promote more women?
Mm-hmm. I think for us, I think it really does start from that in my mind, very simple belief that it's good for performance, it's good for business. And so for us, from the beginning, it's always been very important. I think we look at it in two ways. One is obviously how we're deploying capital and how we're recruiting deal flow and really actively seeking out female founder deal flow as well as deal flow from underrepresented minorities. I think there's a lot of intersectionality between the two that often gets overlooked, and for us that is important in terms of how we recruit deal flow for our accelerator batches, as well as, I guess, the other side of the equation, who is deploying the capital and ensuring that we do have that diverse perspective on the investment side of the investment team. Right now, just as it relates to gender, about 31%, myself included, of our investment partners are female. And for us, we want to continue to push ourselves to do even better as it relates to both investments as well as our staff.